What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Conflicts of Interest. This is episode 24, and I'm the host, Kyle Anslone. Will Porter isn't on the show today, doing a solo show. We just couldn't sync up the schedules. Probably be a little bit of a shorter episode, but I am going to cover some important updates on the new START negotiations between the U.S. and Russia, and then a little bit of debate analysis from last night's debate. So, share the show, find it online at the Libertarian Institute or on YouTube. We have the video version of the show, which I think adds a lot to it with the news ticker and the stories that display on the screen. So definitely check that out and subscribe to the channel. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts as well. If it's like iTunes, give it a rating and a review. And then follow us on Twitter. I'm at Kyle Anslone _. He's at the Will Porter. And then the show is at con _ interest. And with that, let's get into some of the updates on the negotiations of New Start. So the first update I have here on New Start is a story from October 20th, published in Reuters, titled U.S. welcomes Russian offer to freeze warheads totals to extend nuclear pact by a year. And what the story and especially the headline makes it sound like is that the U.S. has received an offer from Russia to extend the New START treaty that includes freezing nuclear warhead totals for the coming year, and that would extend New START by a year. So this really sounds like we're in a good place because the U.S. has received an offer that they're going to accept and have done that. Now, get a story from today, October 23rd, again in Reuters. And this one says that Russia, in this case, they're quoting the deputy foreign minister, says still not close to agreement with U.S. on nuclear pact. And so this would suggest that Russia hasn't actually passed an offer to the U.S. and the U.S. has accepted it. Now, I'm not exactly sure what the main hangups are because it does seem that if you're going to extend the New START treaty, which caps the number of nuclear weapons, that would be okay with capping the number of nuclear weapons where they are. Like that seems like a part of the treaty. So maybe Russia and the U.S. are probably that's not the sticking point. I think it has to do with what kind of warheads Russia is putting on what weapons. The Russians have upgraded some nuclear weapon systems, especially as the U.S. has withdrawn from other treaties like the INF treaty that was under the Trump administration. I think one of his really major foreign policy failures. And we're not going to talk about Biden bringing that up at the debate, unfortunately, although, I think it would be very easy to bring up Trump's record on nuclear agreements, especially the ones with Russia, like the INF treaty, like the Open Skies treaty, and now the New START treaty. How he's been basically so reckless and gambling with these policies, and has now put himself in a position where maybe he was looking to be able to play hardball with Russia and these kind of Trumpian style negotiation tactics, which is press for the best deal possible. And it's now actually gotten to the point where maybe the U.S. isn't in a place to make demands from Russia. Now, I'm not exactly sure if the U.S. is looking to do more than just extend the treaty, because as far as I've seen from Russia, their offers are just a blanket extension of the treaty. Maybe the U.S. is looking to extend the treaty and then put other restrictions on maybe even both nuclear weapons programs, but restrictions that would be targeted on the fact that Russia has developed hypersonic nuclear weapons and potentially a short range missile with a nuclear weapon. Of course, that's the dispute around the U.S. getting out of the INF treaty. So that's where we are on the New START negotiations. I gotta say, earlier in the week, I was a little bit optimistic that it's potential to get a deal done. But now, as we've gotten to the end of the week already, it seems that the U.S. Statements were misleading and that they had not been offered a deal by Russia and had accepted that agreement. The other thing going on, and this is a story from antiwar.com written up by Dave DeCamp, And he says that the U.S. demands countries withdraw from UN nuke ban treaty. And so this isn't the non-proliferation treaty, which is the main treaty that most countries in the world are a part of. This is rather the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. And for some reason, there's this rule with the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons that if 50 countries ratify it, then it would come into force for the entire world and require all countries to get rid of their nuclear weapons. And, even if they're not signatories to the agreement. So, from my understanding, like the U.S., Russia, France, the UK, all are opposed to the treaty and not a part of it. And it's very strange why, under international law, that there would actually be any way to hold any of these countries accountable to gain their nuclear weapons, even if this treaty got to 50 signatories. And so I'm kind of surprised that, the Trump administration is even wasting any kind of political capital on. But they seem to be concerned, so maybe there is a little bit more teeth to it or something like that. But they're trying to pressure some countries that have signed on to it to back off. I'm not sure, if they'll be successful or not. I imagine if Russia, China, France, and the UK are all really opposed to it, as the US says they are, then they'll be able to, use the UN, as these are the members of the Security Council, to essentially nullify anything that would require them to get rid of their nuclear weapons. Although, it's never a bad thing to at least have this as a topic of conversation, even if this ends up just being like a PR thing to get the number of countries signed on here. 50, that maybe you would have to hold more hearings at the UN about getting rid of nuclear weapons. I mean, those kind of things generate different headlines, and that does in some way encourage the conversation, even though I don't think it's the most effective path, and I'm a big fan of world government. All right, everybody, before I move on to the debate analysis, I just take a minute to thank the show's sponsor, Paloma Verde. Paloma Verde sells great CBD products. I've been taking the CBD soft gel capsules one every morning, and it's just been very helpful to me, feeling better throughout the day, especially like kind of bad soreness or bad pain. Also, I feel like been able to stretch a little bit more since I've had a little bit less pain, and it's just been like a generally positive cycle going on. I've talked to other people about their CBD experience. Will says it helps take the edge off at night to help them get some sleep. Other people, again, say, it helps them take the edge off, helps them to relax, especially at the end of the day. But there's a whole bunch of ways that CBD could help you. And so if you go to palomaverde.com, they do, what you should do if you're taking some kind of prescription or, kind of medication of any kind. Look at it, get educated on it, and they have a great CBD education. And then they have their lab results there, so everybody knows that this isn't one of those things that you get at the head shop or the gas station, but the kind of CBD that's dosed the same every time. So it gives you the most consistent results possible. So what you need to do is go palomaverde.com or palomaverdestore.com, and that's where you get your CBD. And when you spend over $75, you use the promo code PEACE, PEACE, for 25% off. Let's get back to the show. All right, everybody. So for the debate analysis, I want to start off just, I guess, by a general observation of what it means to win the debate, because I think a lot of people have, a different standard for what it means to win the debate. The point of the debate is to win the election. So whoever is going to get you the most votes, specifically in the states that you need to win the election with the electoral college system, is the goal of the debate. And so I felt like it was very clear through the debate that Trump was specifically trying to appeal to, I think, probably white, blue collar workers in swing states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, I believe are all states that he specifically mentioned. And so, that I think that was what he was trying to do. Um, Biden, I'm less sure exactly what his direct target of a voter was, but I think he was just trying to generally appeal to get the most votes possible. I don't think either that these people are competing for the same pool of voters either. In the U.S., I think close to, if not a majority of people who are of age and eligible to vote don't end up actually voting. And so there's a whole lot of people that you could get that generally lead to your side or generally agree with, some of the things at least that you have to say, or and I think some people have nobody agree, but maybe even like one issue you right. So that's I think what everybody is trying to appeal to. And so I would say that probably both these people were kind of successful in doing that. Last night, I think Joe Biden came off as capable, not like particularly like, you know, he could go all day, or that, I think he definitely slowed down by the end of the debate. They didn't have any debacles. He was very, sounded strong and commanding. Again, like, I'm not saying that I'm going for any of this. Just, I think that's how he came off at times. I think it was almost too far, and he came off as like too doom and gloom, and too pessimistic, and just generally like a doomer, you know. And so I don't know if that was at all times helpful. But he didn't have any real gaffes. I thought at times when he would come on, got a little much, and probably wasn't great. Trump, on the other hand, I think was probably less aggressive than some of his supporters maybe expected. And especially early in the debate, I don't feel like was assertive enough. I felt that there were a couple times during the debate, like when Biden was, I think, talking about his tax returns, that Trump was saying a whole lot of things, but it was really tangential, and he would like accelerated how fast he talked. And I don't think like there's anything to this particular, but he kind of did come off as guilty once or twice. So I don't know if that was a good look for him. But overall, he seemed fairly composed, and I think he looked as presidential as Donald Trump is going to look. And I guess that's why I'll say about both of them, that part of the reason I think they're both successful is because I think they looked about as presidential as they're capable of looking. Not that that's something I particularly care about, but I think it's something that a lot of voters would maybe look at, especially if they're on the swing issue a little. Really, I'm not sure who helped their cause more. Again, I think both of these guys helped their cause at least a little bit. And of course, what matters a little bit too isn't just the debate, but then how it's spun, and how different campaigns then utilize this material to try to convince people. So there's a lot more to it, but I definitely thought there were some strong points for each candidate and some weak points for each candidate. As far as the overall debate goes, I mean, I think what Americans are ideally looking for in a debate, this was the closest thing that we've seen to it in a long time. It was not cordial, like there was definitely disagreement and hostility between the two candidates, but they weren't over talking the entire time, which helped them to at least seem like they were going back and forth. Although I felt like a lot of times that they weren't necessarily answering each other's questions particularly well, or really phrasing productive questions towards each other. But that said, I think that of what a debate is supposed to look like, this was probably the closest thing. And I don't think anybody is sitting at home, kind of going issue by issue, hearing what the candidates are saying and going, I'm not sure who I'm going to vote for, but I agree with Trump on 3 issues and Biden on 4, so I'm going Biden. I think it's much more of, if Trump is going to say something that gets you excited to go vote, or Biden, same thing. Um, Yeah, so I think that's about everything I have. Oh, maybe the moderator. Everybody is like celebrating the moderator, saying that she did a great job. I mean, the debate was at least a little bit more watchable, so uh, I'm sure she deserves some credit for that. She did ask each candidate at least a couple very pointed questions with some evidence and weight behind it. Um, I mean, like, you can only do so much to like hold them to actually answer the questions. So I'm not saying that she did like a bad job of it, but they kind of said what they wanted to say, and it was what it was. I felt like a couple points she was like pushing for a more aggressive foreign policy, which is very unfortunate position for the moderator to take, and I'm definitely opposed to that. But I mean, that's what you expect, and so I thought, she did a decent job, although I didn't agree with the points that she was trying to make. Um, the first thing she brought up was COVID, which I think made sense to make a topic, and both candidates talked about the lockdown. I think if you are somebody who was looking at this, as a Trump supporter or as a Biden supporter, you definitely just confirmed your bias with whatever the candidate said. I thought that Biden probably sounded like, to anybody who was looking at this a little bit more dispassionately, like have a little bit more facts and evidence on his side. That Trump was kind of all over the place, and I don't think represented his side on this particularly well. That said, I don't think Joe Biden is making an argument to the American people that we need more lockdowns, especially because that he's not actually going to take office till February, January 2021. People don't want to then have lockdowns happening, going into the spring, especially if things are already opened back up. And, that's the kind of stuff that Joe Biden's talking about. Also, the, testing and tracing stuff, as a libertarian, is an absolute nightmare if they got rapid testing all over the place and you constantly have to get swabbed by government agents to go different areas. This isn't what solution to the problem is. Give more government and authority. Um, so I don't think the lockdowns are a great argument. I mean, you could say what you want about if they're effective or not. I tend to disagree. If you look at some of the data, and what it's going to ultimately show is that the lockdowns weren't particularly effective, if not very effective at, or ineffective at actually stopping the spread of the virus. But the long term consequences from the lockdown, you already now have the UN estimating that 10,000 children a month are going to starve to death or die of other kinds of malnutrition because of the, lockdowns, and the fact that the world economy has shut down so much. And so, what's the balance there where you're impoverishing more children and committing more children like suffer and die because of the lockdowns, and you're maybe saving the death or life of some older people in retirement homes and stuff like that. It's in places like the US. I'm not sure what the trade-off is there, when at the end of the day, when you're going to look at like all this data and stuff, I'm not entirely sure that we're going to be happy and be so sure that the lockdowns were the right uh you know solution to all of this. And I'm definitely opposed to the government lockdowns. That um Trump's response to this wasn't very great either. I mean, he says the military is going to go out and vaccinate everybody. I'm certainly not going to be very happy if some soldier sticks his rifle in my face and sticks a needle in my arm and forces me to take a vaccine that I not very interested in taking. I mean, I guess I'm always open to changing my mind on this, but at this point, I don't see a real need to take a COVID vaccine. I'm pretty skeptical of a vaccine that I think be rushed and pushed out so quick, especially if I'm in the category of people that doesn't necessarily have to worry about dying from getting COVID. And so at this point, I wouldn't take it. And Trump is saying his military goons around the country to come stick needles in my arm. That's definitely a terrible, terrible solution to this. Uh, but I'm not sure how far Trump is actually talking about, or actually would be willing to go in forcing people to take this vaccine. I guess would be a lot of the people that are skeptical of the vaccine are his supporters. So hopefully This only end up being a voluntary thing. Even then, having the military go around the country and distributing a vaccine under emergency orders is a kind of terrifying note. Um, Sorry for the people watching video. There might be some small pauses. I got my note here, but I'm just going through it, and I'm on again solo today. Usually, Will talks a little bit, and I have a second to think about it. Um, I think that's all I have on COVID. Again, I don't think Biden made any great arguments here, and I think Trump was arguing hope. I think that message is probably gonna sell better to the vote. But and the people that are already gonna vote for Biden are going to be able to produce some clips of Trump really not making a whole lot of sense with his arguments, and Biden being able to ramble off some facts that at least sound very um then Joe Biden actually brought up the whole Hunter Biden email. I was kind of surprised by that, especially since going into the debate, I was watching on NBC, and the hosts there were already priming everyone like, hey, just be ready that Donald Trump is going to drop a whole bunch of Hunter Biden's emails. And there was at least two or three times during the debate that the corruption surrounding Ukraine was brought up by Joe Biden, or Joe Biden called Trump out for corruption in Russia or China. And I think generally bringing up the subject. In fact, I felt like the moderator was actually trying to steer the debate in a different direction a couple times. Trump was really trying to push and hammer down on it, and Joe was willing to continue talking about it. It was just not exactly what I thought the Biden strategy would be here. I don't think it went particularly poorly for Biden, actually, because Trump was kind of all over the place with his claims. Not that I don't think there's some legitimate issues here to bring up surrounding Hunter Biden's role in Burisma on the board of that company while his father was a very, very powerful man in Ukraine. He was bragged about, able to force them to fire their prosecutor general. I mean, for as much as he talks about Russian influence in the U.S., it's not like Putin could tell Donald Trump to fire Bill Barr or something like that. That's just absurd. Yet this is what he forced the Ukraine government to do and publicly bragged about doing that, right? And so while that inspector general was then investigating the company that his son sat on the board of, like these are just the facts of the story, right? And so this looks very shady, but Donald Trump didn't articulate it that way. He was saying, "Oh, Joe Biden got $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow," and I think the actual claim would be that Hunter Biden got that money, and then not from the former mayor's. He's, I believe, deceased, but his wife would have given Hunter Biden that money. I'm not sure on the truth of that claim, but Trump didn't express it well, and so unless you're somebody that actually follows this very close, you probably had no idea what Trump was talking about, and it probably overall made him look just generally a little bit more discredited on the issue. Because if you're going to make these claims, that Joe Biden was doing shady business with Russia and Ukraine, you gotta be targeted and specific, and have the opportunity to do that. Trump just wasn't able to. During Biden's first little rant on this issue, and several subsequent ones, he came back to the fact that the U.S. isn't tough enough on Russia. So one of the things I believe that is a Joe Biden policy would be to extend the New START treaty with Russia. However, also saying we got to come in and being tough on Russia, which I'm thinking at least means sanctions on the country. It doesn't seem like the things that you would extend the START treaty. If you're sanctioning Russia, they may not be inclined to engage in other talks with. They're destroying the diplomatic relationship in that way. And so, that was a very concerning thing Joe Biden was saying on that. Russia or Trump pointed out that he had the strictest anti-Russia policy of any president, which is absolutely true. Again, as I already mentioned, the destruction of the INF Treaty and the Sky Treaty, key nuclear agreements between the U.S. and Russia have been dissolved by Trump. Trump has continued to build up the U.S. nuclear arsenal, started testing weapons that were formerly banned by the INF Treaty, is carrying out all kinds of different maneuvers in the waters off the coast of Russia with different spy planes. There's constantly interceptions. We have U.S. fleets all over the bodies of water surrounding Russia, and then has continued to move troops eastward in NATO. Even with something like withdrawing troops from Germany, which they try to find ways to applaud Trump. That would be one of them if he's bringing troops home from somewhere. But unfortunately, it looks like maybe even half of these troops end up going to other places, including some eastward, while bringing some home. That's not quite victory that you're looking for. And so, yeah, Trump has had a very aggressive Russia policy, right, to point that out. I think he also did a pretty good job of doing a short summary of why the Russiagate investigation was fake. So again, I am not sure if that's going to really change anybody's mind on anything. Sure, all the Biden people thought he was lying. Sure, all of his supporters, stood up and applauded that. Maybe a couple of people will be rallied to vote out that strong or anything. Again, Trump's kind of tangential and, you know, will just kind of say things along the Russiagate timeline events. And so if you followed it closely, you know about it. And if you've only watched Rachel Maddow, you don't. I already mentioned this, but at one point, the moderator, kind of pushed Trump to call for new sanctions on Russia. Trump, I don't think understood the question and so didn't agree to it, but it's also possible that he just wanted to avoid the subject. Either way, at least he didn't say, "Yeah, I'm looking at more sanctions on Russia," which is something that I could see, Donald Trump just trap him falling in there. Um, then the moderator says, "Okay, onto foreign policy. Trump, a question on North Korea. You have 30 seconds to answer," which is the shortest question of the night. So, I mean, I think that was pretty telling. My biggest complaint with the moderator is just not asking the most important questions. Foreign policy questions are very important. Hell, could ask a question on press freedom and Julian Assange, and here you got like one question that's name foreign policy question. It's on North Korea, and you're like you only get 30 seconds to answer it. And kind of just signals that this isn't a very important issue, and so that was really discouraging. Um, she, asked just Trump kind of about his North Korea policy. I think he actually did a fairly decent job of summarizing the situation in North Korea. Basically, Seoul is very close to the North Korean border. There's no way to really defend Seoul from a North Korean attack should you follow through at North Korea. There's really no way to be tougher on them. And at least he has a decent relationship personally with Kim Jong Un to steer tensions away from nuclear war. He claimed that Obama told him that they were very close to war with North Korea. I have no idea if that's true. I guess if that's true, maybe the fire and fury stuff at the beginning of his administration makes a little bit more sense. But I have no reason to believe that's true, and I'm assuming that was that Trump was saying. It'll be interesting if Obama like comes out and says that's not true or something like that. But anyways, he says, close to war at the start, I've gotten things turned down with my relationship with Kim. Unfortunately, he squandered the chance to have a real foreign policy victory. Like, his fake peace deals he's unrolling. I think he did another one today with Sudan. But Donald Trump has just kind of come up short on his negotiations with Kim, but at least the temperature is turned down. And Donald Trump understands that he can't wage an aggressive war against North Korea because, they had the power to heavily punish a huge chunk of the South Korean population. That includes a lot of Americans. the family. Biden, just went with the Democrat line that we've heard for the past 4 years. Donald Trump loves thugs and Kim Jong Un is a thug, 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 thug. That's just stupid diplomacy, Biden. And, I think that is maybe the place where he looks the least presidential and the most like Trump. You can't imagine Trump saying it about Kim Jong Un, but you can't imagine him saying that about potentially a black man that got shot by the police or something. Just calling him a thug over and over again, and that being his argument. And that's how I thought Joe Biden came off here. So that was pretty discouraging for him to just call Kim Jong Un a thug, because if he is president, what he needs to do is make a deal with you know Kim to ramp down tension. We're still officially at war with North Korea. All these sanctions on North Korea that makes it impossible for South Koreans to engage in any kind of diplomacy with the US will have to be involved in any improvement of relations on the Korean Peninsula. I think Joe Biden's one of the few actual policies I've heard him call for was a nuclear free Korean Peninsula. That may or not be possible, but it's definitely not something that's going to happen in his administration. And if that's the precondition for talks, might as well just about talks. And so Biden's Korea policy was pretty terrible there. Right, the last two subjects that I had to talk about, I'm not going to get into the healthcare stuff. And there's a couple other things that I just don't want to spend another half hour talking about, and I don't think the audience is going to be interested. I'm just going to stick to the main topics that we talk about on the show. Biden on the crime bill, Trump called him out for it, and Biden gave what I felt like was his most thorough rejection of his 94 crime bill that he's bragged about over and over again, and said, that the way forward with drug addicts is treatment rather than jail time. He did call for more drug courts in there. Drug courts aren't an alternative to jail; they're just a part of the jail system. They force people into different treatment programs that don't work for them, and when they don't work, the people are failures and then forced to go back to jail. I don't agree with some of the policy things that Joe Biden called for there, but at least he showed that understanding. I think if Joe Biden is sincere about this, he needs to just come out and say like, "Hey, anybody in jail for drug offenses under my crime bill, I'm gonna go through day one. Send me your name, send me the charges and everything. I'll pardon you straight away, get this all taken care of." And anybody who's suffered under, because like even if you've since gotten out of jail, your life is still affected by all of these felonies. Any job application you fill out, any apartment application you fill out, any I think applications and everything all require you to say if you've had a felony or not. And racking up felonies on all these people has made it very hard for them to move forward in their lives to get jobs, because people don't want to hire felons and stuff like that. And so there's all these consequences to Joe Biden's crime bill, other than just the people still rotting in jail that need pardons and everything to resurrect this and fix this huge blunder. But at least Joe Biden admitted now that it is a blunder. I think previously he had said that like, hey, it didn't go as intended, but actually it was all these states that did things wrong and blah blah blah. That don't make excuses. I felt like he didn't like personally own it that much. He came out with it, well, it was 100-0 in the Senate or something like that. But you know, own it, say like, yeah, it was my bill and it was so bad. Now I'm going to fix it. I think actually taking ownership would help it to faster. Trump's response to this was, you've been in office for 47 years. You were vice president for 8 years. Why don't you fix it then? I think that's an effective argument and something that Biden really didn't have an answer for. He pointed out that Obama pardoned 3,500 people. I'm sure a lot of them were in jail because of Biden's crime bill. That's not all of them, and so it didn't really fix the problem. It just, you know, fits the problem on a very small scale. And again, even if you pardon 3,500 people, help them get out of jail, still hundreds or thousands or more impacted and suffering with all these felonies. The other problem I have with Biden's statement there is, while he's saying that treatment is the solution, he's not calling for the decriminalization of drugs. And unless you're calling for the decriminalization of drugs and you're going to treat drugs as a crime, then you're really not moving away from the criminal reaction and towards the treatment based reaction. Also, not everybody uses drugs as a has an addiction issue, and so recreational drug use, that's something that Biden's going to allow, or is that something he's going to continue to have the police force? Because again, then you're really not solving this problem. Some nice statements. Trump talked about some of his criminal justice reform, but did so extremely ineffectively. And so I don't think he really communicated some of the things that he has done specifically to reverse the consequences of Biden's crime bill. So, came up short on that one. Also, Donald Trump has been Mr. Law and Order and is really worse on this whole thing than Biden. I think this, came up in the context of race. I don't have this on, and so on that subject, I don't think that Trump did a particularly good job or anything like that. He hasn't said anything that he hasn't said before, so I don't know if he turned anybody off from voting for him. He mainly tried to redirect and drag Biden's name through the mud here, either with the crime bill or you know I guess he didn't force Biden to acknowledge that the cages that the kids were kept in were built under the Obama administration. I know that some of those prisons were. I don't know all the facts and details here. But he tried turning around him on that. Oh, and he said that Biden had called people super predators, referring to the crime bill, and it's particularly related to crack, and a smear against black probably particularly male Americans, right? That was kind of the derogatory thing, and that's the picture that Biden was painting at the time. I don't believe Biden actually ever said the term super predator that was used by Hillary Clinton. However, Biden did apparently routinely use the word predator, and so Trump isn't completely off base there, but it's not exactly what he said. What Biden said, although what Biden said is still disturbing, and had Trump said something like that, call him a racist. Um, yeah, so I'm not sure that any of this segment plays out particularly well for Trump. He didn't say anything great. He went back to there's some bad people coming over the border and Biden let them in. Um, I don't know how effective of an argument that is for people. It may be something that actually rallies support against him, just because I think that's the kind of thing people really don't like. Some people really don't like hearing. I'm sure, but I'm not sure that's his most effective moment, and I didn't think that he came out ahead in that segment. Although I think he slings enough mud on Biden that he doesn't come off like Biden could be the anti-racist and Trump could be the villain. Immigration was briefly discussed. I point out, part of what Trump said. He said he built 400 feet of wall. Biden really tried to invoke the tears on the kids that have been separated from their parents, which is a really horrible story. There, Trump administration, it's horrible for doing what they did. Um, but it's coming from Joe Biden, right? This is a guy who was a part of the administration that I believe it has deported more people than any other administration. I know Trump has only had 4 years, but the Obama administration has still deported more. And so, it's hypocritical coming from Biden, and Trump points that out. And so I think for a lot of people, that kind of takes the sting out of a lot of the things you could say against Trump on this. All right, well, I don't want either of these people to be presidents. Not going to vote for either of them. Anything that any of them said, maybe except for Trump's statement on North Korea, and Biden's statement on understanding that drug treatment is the way to go and not criminalization. Everything was bad. Don't have much positive to say about the candidates, but that is my reaction. And I think I will just wrap up the show there. All right, conflicts of interest. Share the show. You can find it on either mine or Will's Twitter. I am at Kyle Anzalone _. He's at the Will Porter Show at con_interest. Facebook, conflicts of interest. YouTube, the show is conflicts of interest. Definitely check out that. Then you can donate to the show at patreon.com/conflicts of interest. Tuning in.